Thanks, Ron.
Yeah,
You gotta use the facility, go ahead, I'll wait a minute, go ahead.
They've waited on me before, so we can wait on you.
Roll call, please.
Deb Bagan. Here. Gary Cody.
Present?
Ann Dixon.
Here.
Mr. McGee.
Here.
Greg LeBoissonere.
Here.
Nick Gorham's absent, and Ed Wazika.
Present.
Okay, pledge of allegiance, Town Sergeant, if you would lead us in the pledge of allegiance. All stand, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Town Sergeant, if you would give us emergency evacuation plan, please. Okay, the next item on the agenda is. Yeah, whatever. The next item on the agenda is a work session, a presentation and discussion of the town manager's budget message, operating and capital fund budgets. This is strictly a preliminary presentation of the budgets. We have a lot to absorb, so the town manager and the finance director are here to ask any basic questions, but we will have further work sessions to get in depth. So after the town manager does give us his presentation, obviously he's there to answer some questions, but it should be relatively quick and thorough. Mr. Town Manager, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Please forgive me. It's my first one I'm doing on these, so I'm more than just a little bit nervous.
Relax, don't worry.
I do want to preface my remarks with when we get done with this presentation, there's nobody that's going to be happy. This was a really, really tough budget season. We have a lot of mandatory cost increases that are affecting our budget that we actually have absolutely no control over, and we can't do much about them. Yet we still have to live within the means of the cap, as well as provide for the school department budget increases that they have that a lot of cases are mandatory. But we have, when you get a chance to go through this, you'll see that we cut nearly $1.1 million out of the request from the department heads, up to and including this morning where we cut nearly $300,000 out of this budget because we got hit Friday where we had a new bond issuance that's going out for the police DHS building, which has in turn just added an additional $307,000 to our bond indebtedness for principal and interest payments. That was not calculated out in as we were doing the budget. Didn't realize that was coming up. I thought it would be following year. It's not. It's coming into the 2020 budget. We had to adjust for that. So we cut out nearly $300,000 this morning out of these budget lines between DPW, police, and Parks and Rec. It's ugly. There's just nothing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go over. I don't have an official budget at this point from the school department. I met with Mr. Levis today. There were a couple of things that came up on Friday in reference to their budget and the presentation of their budget, not the presentation, but the way their budget was calculated and some things in there. And I don't want to go, I don't want to get into adversarial back and forth with the schools. We've agreed to meet on Thursday with Sarah. She'll be back. Sarah wasn't here today, so Craig, Sarah, myself, and Mr. Arnett will be meeting on Thursday to discuss some things. What I will say is right now the school department has a preliminary request in for $2,389,553. And they've also projecting a increase in revenue from the state of 1.6 thereabouts. That's fluctuating a bit, so I went down with the lower number. But that's what we're looking at right now. All right, our budget. We've got total mandatory increases in line items of $1,341,000 that are covered, and I'll go through them. Our increase in the municipal budget is $1,358,000. So when you look at that, there's $17,000 difference that isn't mandated. And when you start looking at the line items in each of the department's budgets, you'll realize that there's a lot of cuts in there so that's 17,000 over. Some of that is actually mandated, but there were just smaller amounts, and I didn't want to start putting them all on here. So it's a very small increase it's what we have to do. Out of it, we have a $206,000 increase in the police pension ARC. We have no options on that. That has to be paid. We have a $51,000 increase in the municipal pension ARC. Again, we don't have much of an option on that. That's what we get in. Yes, sir.
Those are mandated by the state to meet the corrective action that's being taken on all municipal budgets. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Those are mandated increases.
They are mandated
Okay,
increases.
that we were explained, when that first went into effect, we were told by the state actuarial and the Auditor General that would be going up on a yearly basis.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We also have the school SRP pension has got a projected mandatory increase of $172,000. Now, even though this is a school union, a couple of years ago, one of the former town managers, in an agreement with the school, agreed to take over funding this pension. At the time, it was about $412,000 or $413,000, and it stayed that way for a couple of years. The increase was actually supposed to occur last year, but because it got so late to us, there was just no way to get this into last year's budget. The new actuarial numbers give, with this year's increase of $172,000. Again, mandated because we have to make these pension payments. We have an increase in debt service for the DHS PD building, the new bond that is being sold shortly, of $307,000. That is, again, we don't have an option around that. Let me correct that. There is one option around there. We could actually use the bond premium, which is basically borrowing more money for this year, and pay off the $307 increase with more borrowed money. So effectively, we pay off our American Express card with our Visa card. So that makes absolutely no fiscal sense.
And just add it to the back end.
And we bat it to the back end. So that is just not even a viable option. It is just there, and I just explained it because it is a possibility, which would be the worst thing we could ever do. So that's not, but it's there. We have an increase in medical and dental rates of $130,000. Go ahead.
Before you go on, and I know from talking to you that this $307,000 was kind of a late curveball. that you guys found out about.
Yes, it was.
Can I ask why?
Honestly, we were doing the bond issue at the same time. We didn't have any numbers, and it just kind of, during everything else we were doing, it slipped my mind until the very end, to be honest with you, that we were getting hit with this 300,000, that the increase for the principal and interest on this bond issuance. I know there's typically about a year's period in time, but because it's coming in as early as it is,
Right.
we'll be paying it in like March or May.
Which is really early in comparison.
And that's what's happened. So my original thought was it was gonna be another year down the road, it wouldn't hit, but because we have to sell it now, it's gonna be it's gonna be hit in next year's budget, so we didn't have an option on that. Other than holding off on issuing it, which means stopping the project.
Yeah, no, not an option.
I mean, so that's why. And again, we dealt with it by reducing budgets down to handle it. I mean, we didn't have a choice anyways. Even if we knew, we'd be in the same boat on having to reduce those budgets because the money's just not there. I mean, so the fact that we found out late and we realized it on Friday, we realized it before any of this was done and presented, but it wouldn't have made any difference on the effect. The effect was still, we would have had to adjust for that money anyway.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We got a refuse disposal increase of $53,000. Please? Oh, medical dental, I'm sorry. Medical dental of $130,000 increase. That actually may drop down. We do not have final numbers on that. And some of these, we don't have final numbers, but they're effectively worst-case scenario, so we don't have to go back and crank them up. So the medical and dental, it's projected out at about a 9% increase and a 4.5% increase on the dental. There's actually a little bit of a saving grace in the medical on some of the budgeted amounts from last year had amounts that were actually over what was needed because people have left medical. So the increase isn't a full 9% that 130 represents. It's actually less than that. So, but that could go down. It could go down more once we get the final numbers in.
We're still purchasing our medical and our dental through the trust.
Yes, we are.
Do we do any better shopping?
We have attempted to shop in the past, and there hasn't been a substantial or a worthwhile savings on the past. We did not do it this year. It's something we could look into and seeing about what we could do. Pretty much the only other one to go back to would be the WB is around. We do with the trust, though. They handle all of our IOD claims as well, the workers' comp for police, which is an add-on, which they do at a very reasonable price because we've got the medical through them. So that in itself could be a substantial increase if we went to somebody else and we didn't get that piece of it, if they didn't provide that. So, but yeah, it's something we could look at in the future to see if we can make a reduction in those numbers.
Okay.
Like I said, refuse disposal, that's a $53,000 increase that Kevin's projecting on that one based on what we're being told by the state. Contract service increases, those are some of the contracts that you've recently approved, and they are increases over previous years. So that's about another $60,000 of increased cost that we have. Police salary, yes, ma'am.
Could you remind me, with contract services increase, remind me what that is?
That includes some things like the cemetery contract. Okay, that's one of them that's got an increase. The sewer, the
Catch basin.
catch basin cleanouts, that one's increased. Kevin had another one that increased by, I forget the amount of 20 or 30,000. So that's where those came in. It's those annual contracts that we do to cover services that we don't do, but we outsource. So those contracts have increased. Police salary increase, $134,000 over last year's budget. And I got to explain this one because this one is actually, they've done a lot on this. Last year's increase in their payroll with the contract, new contract, and their increased salary went in, and that was about $125,000 in that cost. Because we were in contract negotiations with them, and an unknown amount, that amount was not put into their budget. An amount to cover that, or what we assumed and what we maxed out, or we thought would be the maximum amount that we would that they would get, or we would give, was put into the contingency fund. to cover that, and then it would have been moved into the police employee line item to cover it. Well, because they've actually had several officers who were deployed, and there's some savings in that line. That line item should, in theory, be about $260,000 is what the actual increase would have been. But because they've looked at their budget, looked at who may not be there for military, we've been able to reduce that down and make a savings in that line item over what the actual increase would be. But we've saved some of the costs that would have been, we've taken it out of the budget is what we've done.
All right, now I'm confused. And I'm gonna tell you why I'm confused.
Go ahead.
Because quite typically, if someone's going on long-term deployment or short-term deployment, you have to cover their shifts with overtime costs, not straight time costs. So why would that come down?
That's not, that's a different, the overtime cost is, the chief has projected the overtime costs are gonna remain the same because he doesn't have room to increase them, and he'll live with what he's got. We could be facing a higher increase on this next year, on this line item. But next year, we're gonna have something out of here that we've got this year. And that's a $228,000 tax assessor statistical review. That is a one-time cost. It happens every 3 years. That's in there this year. If we have to increase the police department budget to take into account what we've decreased it this year for those savings, we've got that revenue that's in the budget there. It's not something we wanted to do, but it's something we were forced to do to make this budget a doable budget this year under the circumstances.
So, Mr. Manager, what you're saying is that the overtime that's gonna be paid, actually, they're not gonna replace the people that are deployed. They're gonna make do without it, they're not gonna use overtime to replace them.
The colonel would at times, I'm assuming, just make transfers in bodies to fill the spots that, again, overtime would occur where if in the cases of like minimum manning kicks in and those kinds of things. So shifts could be made on that so the costs don't increase. He has a line item of overtime in there, $400,000. There's $400,000 in that line item for overtime, which has been in there for the last couple of years. He didn't use it all last year, if I'm not mistaken. It wasn't. In fact, last year, the police department kicked back about $400,000 because of savings with officers who were on deployment. So that's why we've looked at some of that. We're trying to be more, I told you I was gonna try to make this a realistic budget, and that's what I'm trying to do on this. Those numbers should be down. We're trying to make the savings to make this where we can actually live with this. Again, even with those cuts, like I said, we're looking at $1.3 million increase in cost that we can't, I can kick it back in there and cover, and we cannot make the numbers work if we do that. And realistically, it's not going to be needed based on what we're seeing on the trend on officers who will be deployed and the savings that will occur in that. Next year, again, different, but that 228, like I said, which is the one time that has to go in there to cover that. There will be a reimbursement on that of about $100,000 coming back in on that.
However, let me just jump in real quick. However, the expenditures have to remain in the budget as a total expenditure for the accounting side. We have to hit and show the account that it was expensed. So we can't show a net, even if we are getting reimbursed for it, we have to show the expenses. It's just recorded to
Total
show it.
expense that occurs before that reimbursement comes back.
Exactly.
Understood.
Okay. Now, controversial piece. You guys are gonna love me or hate me on this one. We've got to fix the sewer fund, the enterprise fund that's going on and the issues that we've got with that fund. We have a preliminary report back from the Auditor General. I can't go into details with it until we've got it finalized. The only two that are involved at this point are John and myself. He doesn't even want us to kick it to the attorney, the solicitor at this point until we've gotten through reviewing it and going and getting more towards a finalized one that we've got. But one thing that I will say, one of the recommendations in there on going to fix this is we pay about this year approximately $677,000 to West Warwick debt on the plant. That, because of the way the Enabling Act legislation was done, that money can in fact be paid from the general fund and not necessarily from the sewer enterprise fund. So what we're looking to do is, in a perfect world, in a great world, we'd move all 677,000, or attempt to, based on if the council has a desire to do this. What's happening, if we look at it realistically, what's happening right now is we're funding it indirectly from our budget because we're taking it, $2.9 million has been used out of the reserve fund to supplement that. What this does is it takes it out of draining our reserve fund and putting it into operational cost, which means it's funded by the budget. It's not a drain on that fund. So it's more realistic. It's a proper way to fund it under the circumstances. We've got a whole plan that we'll be presenting on what we need to do with this sewer budget and the sewer enterprise fund once we get this report back and we're allowed to go into deeper on it. But by doing this, it helps to begin the process of stabilizing that and putting that fund into the black instead of the red where it is right now. I had my way, I'd love to do all 677. We don't have it in this budget to do it. I've got $200,000 listed that we move from that to this, to our operating budget.
Mr. Manager, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Just for a little context for everybody, the town of West Warwick, per order of the EPA, did approximately a $37 million upgrade to their plant. Because of the flow that we own into that plant, we actually own a portion of that plant, and the $77
this year.
$677,000. That naturally, West Warwick bonded out that $32 million upgrade. They're making payments. This is our portion of that payment to pay back that bond, correct? All right, this is our portion, and it's going to be a reoccurring thing until, I think it was a 20-year bond when they took it out.
Yes, it is. It
So this is going to be a reoccurring payment every year in our budget. So this isn't anything new that's added in. This is there every year since the repairs were made, since the $32 million project was made.
Exactly. We're paying it now. We pay it every year now. It has to continue to be paid. This is just the process of trying to moving some of that over into here, so it doesn't come out of the reserve fund. It also helps to, whatever we move into this, and whatever ultimately the council decides on how much of that amount that comes in, and when I say that, I mean the whole 677. That doesn't mean it's going to stay there. And as the sewer enterprise fund stabilizes, gets back onto better footing, we can move that funding back over to the other side, to the other piece. Again, it is authorized by statute. This is not something that we're doing that is not illegal. It's not illegal. It's warranted. It's recommended by the Auditor General, and I think it's one of the best things we can do to start working on getting this stabilized. Now, is there going to be some people who are going to be upset with this? That's why I said nobody's going to love me when I'm done with this thing. The people who don't have sewers and who are going to be paying a piece of this. And if you look at our budget right now, $28,000 is a penny on the budget. So we're looking at about 8 cents, 9 cents of our tax rate would be for paying this on every taxpayer, 8 or 9 cents per thousand. I think it's something that we need to do. I think it's something that we have to do, more than we even need to do. We have to do it to assist in stabilizing that fund until we get all of the other pieces in place and we make the other changes that need to be done, that we've looked at, that you guys have looked at, and you'll see documented and confirmed by the Auditor General when we can release this report. Once it's finalized by him, you'll see that these are all parts of that.
I think instead of the expenses being put on the, 1,800 sewer users in the town, in reality, the whole town could benefit from this if it ever grew enough, so I think it makes sense. And
The economic development piece, the problem with all of this is there's like people, we are looking at and trying to change that agreement. How successful we'll ever be is beside the point. There is a nuclear option, obviously, in that contract, and that is we simply walk away, and we only pay what we actually, the piece of what we use, instead of the piece that we're paying now. If we do that, the likelihood of getting any more capacity in that system is slim. At that point, we end our ability to do any kind of economic development. We end our ability to connect any parts of center of New England and any of these other new projects that are going up. It's being fiscally foolish to do that if we just walk away from that. So we need to continue to try to negotiate and try to move those costs down, and we are doing that. But in the meantime, we've got to be realistic, and this is a real cost, and all this is doing is coming out of our reserve fund, and that's not the way to do this, because we're draining that. This stops a piece of the drain.
At some point, you're gonna get your reserve fund down below the 10% or 9%, and Moody's gonna look at that, and they're gonna downgrade our bond rating again. Not that that's hurting my feelings, because, sorry. I got these new hearing aids, and I hear so well now, I keep forgetting the microphone. Eventually, it'll downgrade our bond rating. Moody's will downgrade, and
You
not.
saw that on the last review.
Right, and not that I intend, not that I think that we should be bonding any more money on behalf of the taxpayers in the town of Coventry, but I know how much work it takes to get that bond rating back up, and it almost ties our hands into the future.
It does.
We're just kicking it down the road to the next council, and kicking it down the road to the next generation, and kicking it down. Listen, if we can't leave it better than we found it, then we shouldn't be sitting here. It's that simple.
And that's what I'm trying to do with this budget. I'm trying to do with moving this over, which is the thing the smart thing to do. It's up to the council. You're gonna do what you guys want to do. My recommendation is we move that over. We have beat this budget up. We have spent the last couple of months going through this thing and going line by line by line on this budget. We have taken everything out of there that we can take out. There's only one thing left to take out of this budget, and that's people. And we take people out, we're taking services out. There's no getting around it. That's the only other thing we can do. We have put these line items down to bare minimum. When you review this budget and you see what we've done, like I said, I cut $1.1 million out of their request,
Okay.
with their assistance in some cases.
Can I make a comment on that?
Please do.
I know you've worked hard on this, and I've been in conversation with you over the last several weeks about, we can't make it all up on the municipal side. We're a small fraction of the budget. So I'm hoping that the schools work as diligently as the municipal side has when we work out our budget with them next week or 2 weeks from now. Next week, we really have to work together to make this work, because you can't make a budget work by cutting 20% of the budget out of the municipal side. It has to be shared by both, so we have a lot of work to do.
Like I said, we have made a huge number of cuts on this budget. There wasn't a single line item that we didn't look at. And by the way, it wasn't just me. It was the finance director, the department heads, Therese handling the finance on the police side. We've all worked, we've all spent a lot of time on this. So this is not just me. This is the entire team that's worked on this to get this to where it is.
You know how that works. If you really want to save money, let a woman control it.
Good thing your mic wasn't on again.
Okay, so that's all the bad news. We actually have a little bit of, not much, but a little bit of good news on funding what we need for our piece. Because we've also, if you look at, well, that one's delayed. The proposed municipal budget increase is $1,557,780. That includes the municipal increase plus the $200,000 that we want to move into from the sewer enterprise fund. That's where the 155 comes up to. We have a revenue increase from non-property tax of $202,000 on the other sources. So in turn, that makes the actual levy increase that we need on this $1,355,467, or about 1.94% increase on the levy. So we've actually got some other increases in other revenue, not a lot, but it is, so it's helping to offset some of this cost increase. Again, we've beat all these numbers up. Everything on the revenue obviously is always a projection. It's working on what we've got, what's happened in the past, and that's where these numbers, so we've got a couple of areas where we got some increases.
So if the school department only wants maintenance of effort, we could all come off as heroes this year.
I seriously doubt maintenance of effort will be what the school department requests. I've looked at theirs. They've got some increases as well, like we do, like mandatory increases. I'm not, they're there, and they've got some issues as well. They've got the labor costs that are increasing. They've got their pension costs that are increasing, medical. I'm not, I'm not standing up for them, but I'm being realistic on the budget, and that's what we all need to do. And they're there, they've got some, so how much are they gonna, again, that's why we need to sit, we need to look at everything, and we need to look at how that was structured, because there's some issues that may or may not be valid on something else. Do I have any questions so far? I know. Please, if you look at your packet and you look, you'll see the pages 1 through 53 is the budget, and that's what you will normally see in your budget book once we finalize it. But this is what you normally get. There's just a lot of other fluff. Thank you. There's a lot of other fluff that goes in it. But there's also some good fluff that goes in it, and we're working on the cost analysis of employee cost. That'll be in there. So there's some other that's not so much fluff, that just with a month shortened time frame, we're scrambling to try to get this done. I'm not making excuses, because I feel bad, because I wanted this to be. We have had the bond, the issues with the buildings and everything else. There's just several other issues going on that we've been fighting along and doing. So this, with a month shortened time, this is killing us to get this
Mr.
done.
Manager, I can tell you this, that having just like the rest of the council, received this package as we sat down tonight for this meeting, you're not going to get a lot of technical questions from me. I need a lot of I may ask a lot of background questions, but until I have a chance to sit down with my calculator and a little peace and quiet and go over this, and I do need our finance director's private line, because there have been times at 3:30 in the morning when I find a mistake, I'm on the phone with the finance
He's up.
director.
He's up.
So,
Oh, yeah.
but I look forward to being able to ask questions on this budget in the future.
I know in the past, there have been occasions in the past where you've actually received this a couple of days in advance prior to the meeting. You got it out on like Friday. That gave you the weekend to look at it. I truly don't think that's anywhere sufficient time to go through this for yourself. So I know I did it a little bit differently. I want to set up a date. That's the second part of this meeting tonight. Set up a date. We can either do it 1 day, 2 days, whatever way you want to do it. Well, we're going to bring the department heads in with no other items on the agenda. It is simply going to be review of the department budgets. So we can go through those one by one, or whichever ones you want to. So that's why I've done it a little bit differently. We're going to need to do that in the next week or so. But to give you time to absorb this, go through it all, formulate your questions, and see where, because again, this is going to be like Survivor. It gets turned over to you. The power goes to you once I finalize mine, and you make whatever cuts and changes that you want to make in this. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, Mr. Arnett, I'm not going to call you at 3:30 in the morning, okay, I promise. Okay.
Usually up by 4, though.
Yeah. I'm looking at this chart here. Now,
That
I'm
is the
not sure-
CIP chart,
What does CIP mean?
the capital improvement plan.
That's for the capital.
I haven't gotten to that part yet.
Oh, we haven't got to that. Okay.
That's gonna be next on my
I've
agenda.
lost my sequence because some of the pages are not numbered. So,
No, the budget pages are numbered. The other pieces are things I added in, so you
Okay.
had copies of everything.
okay.
The revenue sheet,
So
you,
this is just a capital improvement, all
yep,
right?
the revenue sheet. Are there any questions on the operating?
No, not yet.
I just have a quick question. We were just talking about the schools. When will we get the hard copy of our budget book from the schools?
I'm meeting with the schools on Thursday with Sarah and Craig, with John and I, and we will be discussing final hard copies from them. But again, it's got to be an authorized and approved budget. And as I said, there may be some issues in there that are something we've got to go through. So I don't want to I don't want to start back and forth. I want to do it with them. I want to deal with them. And then as soon as we get that, we will get it to you. It's going to have to be approved
I thought the school committee was, am
they
I
did.
wrong?
They did. They
thought
did put out a
approved it.
budget, and they did approve a budget.
They sent it to us in an attachment in an email.
They
Yeah,
did.
It's a PDF, but it's very blurry.
It's
very
blurry as heck. It's tough to
You
read.
can't read
But we
it.
did receive something from.
But there are some issues that may make that not the budget that they have to finalize and present. But again, we're going over some issues with them.
I guess
No,
my
I'm just,
que-
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Once
because
that's
in-
done, we will.
I know Ann's new.
My copy was very clear, I mean, when I pulled it up.
Yeah, mine was extremely blurry, you couldn't.
We're-
you
we're-
couldn't
we're
read.
attempt-
I didn't want to print out 85 pages, though. That
But
was
we
the
typically
problem.
get, that's why I was asking, because we typically have a hard copy already from the.
The copy I have is quite, it's blurry, it's ugly. We're trying to get get an Excel version of their entire budget, which it's done in. That budget, the print off the PDF is from
We've had
Excel.
that in the past.
I'm trying to get it. No, that's all I'll say right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so,
Mr. Manager, if we make one more question, we will have that in time for our
Oh,
budget
without a doubt,
session
without a doubt.
With the schools, I want to have time to go over that and read it, okay.
yes, you will have it. Again, we've met a couple of times. We're trying to work together across the board, so we're not having some of the issues that have appeared in the past. So we're working on that, and we'll be meeting, like I said, we're meeting with them Thursday on that.
And we're supposed to meet with them March 4th.
March 4th.
That's on our calendar.
Right,
No, we
Sarah-
also have,
Sarah
yeah,
doesn't get back till Wednesday.
Yeah, tomorrow. She gets back tomorrow.
we also have a meeting
Yep.
next Monday.
That's Wednesday. I'm lost too. And then we're meeting Thursday morning.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on that at this point? I know you're gonna have lots later on after you review it, but at this point, it's a tough budget. And like I said, nobody's liking me after this one. And the school department on what we're gonna have to recommend to them is not gonna like me.
It is
But
what
it
it
is what it is. And the numbers are the numbers, and we only can do with what we got. And that's what we've done on our side. And, you'll see when you review it.
You weren't doing this for the popularity, are you?
Thank God I wasn't. I'm still wondering why I'm doing it, okay? That thought crosses my mind every day. Okay, so if that's, if you got nothing else on that one, we're gonna go over the CIP, which is, we did a little different format this year than what you've received in the past. Normally, it's just typed up and done. Well, our planning director, because the CIP budget has to go to the planning commission for review before it comes here, did all this nice work and put it into charts and broke it down and did a heck of a job. And she had done such a nice job on it. I couldn't see not using that and presenting it out. All I did was combined it into the 5-year plan with the totals and stuff that are required on the very last page, and that's what that is. That's the 5-year plan for capital. Again, I can't even make a recommendation on the capital. On the school side, there is a piece that they will be, but again, because of the couple of the issues that are going on, I can't even do that at this point. As far as the municipal side, you're looking at that. The capital side, as ugly as it is, and as much as they're looking for, there's nothing there for it. There's no money there for capital again this year. We're gonna be looking at some things, once this is over, up to and including like some of the properties and trying to come up with other ways to get some revenue for the capital. The landfill for solar farm, that's an area that we're looking at, that possibly earmarking that towards capital improvement monies once we get that leased out. So there's some other areas we're looking at as part of next year. Again, it doesn't do us much good this year, but based on what we've got, there's a lot of good requests here. There's a lot of things that are needed across the board on all of these. You've got everyone's 5 years in that last 5 pages, 6 pages.
Yep.
So you can look over what everybody's looking for. But I can't recommend funding any of it at this time because we just don't have the revenue to fund it.
You have mentioned that it's gonna be a couple of rough years. Next year's gonna be a difficult year too for us to get through, but once, things are gonna start looking up.
Following year, as we look out and plan for a 5-year plan, and we look out after 20's gonna be tough, 21's gonna be tough. 22 gets a little bit easier because, John, what frees up, how much, $1 million, what? Over a little,
But you gotta tack in the police department and basically focus back down to around 6.
We absolutely can't bond anything out for the next several years till we get this squared away.
but in 2 years, when that bond matures, there is $1 million of decreased bond payments that we have. Again, we're adding on 300 this year, 20, that bond increases, and then in 21, that one increases as well. effectively, like John said, there's probably gonna be about a $600,000 net gain out of bond savings. That money becomes available. And it's not required on this. So that one's gonna be a little bit easier. When's the next piece kick in? And then 24,
2 years right after. And it's a pretty much constant after that.
it's not, I mean, it's not huge money, but it is a reduction in our expenses. My recommendation, again, I'm only the interim, but my recommendation is we do not even begin to look at a bond for anything in this town for the next several years. If we do, we are just risking putting ourselves over the cliff. Again, if you look at our bond, you'll see the bond cost in there. That's ours, that's not the school piece on the school bonds. That's simply the town's bonds. That's gonna increase because of the second phase of the police bond. We've also, the way those bonds were structured, it kicks up higher in the third year, fourth year. The payments kick up a little bit. That's why, but we knew we had this coming off, so we structured it to try to ease up a little bit now, and then it'll start kicking in when
Right,
the,
but that's so we won't have a balloon at the end.
Correct.
That's why they increase in
Correct.
3 and 4.
correct.
You got to remember too, these bonds that we have, they all been voter approved bonds. I mean,
All of
and
the-
we
all-
refinance them. It's to the point now where it's not worth it to try to change them at all. We're as low a rate as we can get. They've all been voter approved, so it's expenses that, it's not something that we put on ourselves. As the voters, we needed this stuff, but we gotta pay, it's a loan, we gotta pay.
Now, I mean, a bond is a loan, and some people don't understand that. A bond doesn't mean you just go get free money, and there are a lot of people who vote for them on the state side, and they don't realize it's gotta come from somewhere, and that's what's happening. I mean, we've got a lot of bonds, and I've heard people say, well, we just need to rebond to take care of the schools. What are we gonna pay it with?
That's right.
Where's it coming from? I mean, so there just isn't, it is not fiscally responsible for us to put out any bonds for any amount, any reason, except to avoid catastrophe over the next several years. If we do, we're being foolish, because we need to start getting these costs under control. We need to start looking, I'm gonna get beat up even more. We need to start looking at all of our labor costs as far as what we can do to decrease some of those costs. We need to look at combining some departments as far as, shared services, and not be doing the same thing in 2 different or 3 different areas. So again, all of these things we've begun to look at. We're looking at all of those. We're also looking at what properties does the town have that are sitting there doing nothing. They're off the tax rolls, and they just sit there, and we're not gaining anything out of it. And in fact, we've got expenses because of them. So we're looking at all of that to try to come up with, again, some savings and some solutions, and hopefully some additional revenue.
Well, I'm glad you said that about the shared services and combining maybe some departments and things like that. But I want you to understand, from my perspective, combining departments and getting rid of 5 hourly employees that provide services to the taxpayers is not where the savings comes from.
No, it isn't.
Combining those departments and getting rid of some of the big paychecks, that's where the savings comes from,
I
not
agree.
the people that work every
You
hour
did
and
not hear me
provide
say-
services.
You did not hear me say, lay off any employees.
No, I understand that, Ed. No, I'm not
I did-
insinuating that's what you said.
Nope, that's not.
I'm just telling you
I
from
agree.
my
And
perspective.
the other savings also, Gary, come from when the fact that if we shut down a facility, and those maintenance costs and those costs to keep that building open and those facilities operating are also a savings. It's things like that. You're right. So that's where, again, we're looking at all of that. Could we have a company come in and do it and do an analysis? We could. But we've got people here, people that know what the system needs and what we do and how we operate and what we can do to try to make those changes. Should they have been done before? I can't look back. That's not what we're doing. Since you guys put me in this seat, my whole line has been Coventry moving forward, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fix the things that are wrong. We're trying to make the changes. We've beat these budgets up. We've been realistic in some line items that were underfunded, and we've brought those up, because if you got 50 grand in bills, contract bills for a line item, and you've only got 30 grand, you're only got to steal it from somewhere else. That's ridiculous. We've made those moves. That's why, even as far as on the police employee side, moving that down, because it's a realistic number that we can reduce this next fiscal and not affect the budget, but save enough to make it so this budget can roll through. And then next year, when that 228 is no longer on the books, opens up to make that more accurate, if in fact it needs to. Again, we've got to look at that, and that's the things we're trying to do, and hopefully the next person who is up in front of you people next year will have done the same thing. But that's what we've tried to do, and that's why, when you look at this budget, go to town. We've beat it up. I don't think you're gonna find much in there that we can take out and still operate. I see nothing but employees, and that's the only other thing we can do. And I've looked at that, I'll be honest with you. I've looked at that, I've already got one, if you tell me you wanna cut that by X number of dollars, we've looked at where we could do that if we have to. And it's not gonna be pretty. It's not gonna be pretty for the service cuts that are gonna be required to do that. The employees there will be several employees that would have to be lost again, depending on how much you wanna cut it. If it has to be done, I know where some of it can come, where 300,000 to 500,000 can come from. And I've already talked to the department head on what we can do, but it's gonna be an ugly, ugly situation for the town. Because that's what it means. It means reduction of services. People are not gonna get they're not gonna get some of the things they get, their lawn clippings picked up, their bulk pickup, their ability to come down here. People don't understand that transfer station and operating the bulk pickup and the picking and the yard waste pickup. That amounts to about $300,000 to $500,000 a year that it costs this town to provide that service to the residents. That is an extremely expensive function, but it's something that a lot of people use. It's necessary. Could we cut it? If you tell me to cut the budget, we can cut it, but it's gonna be a lot of hurt to people in this town.
We're gonna end up with it anyway.
We're gonna end up with it all over, and we don't have the people to pick it up.
End up with it all over town.
'Cause it's gonna still be-
People to go pick it up, and it's coming back here anyway.
Exactly.
They're gonna be throwing it out of back of pickup trucks when nobody's looking.
Exactly, and that's the point on, we can cut, but it doesn't mean it's a realistic cut or an effective cut. It doesn't,
I think Councilwoman Dixon has something to say. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. One, I know that you can't share with us the report from the Auditor General on the sewer, but I'm wondering, based on your review of that report, whether there are any potential costs associated with implementation of any of the recommendations that have not been included in this budget.
no. Not that, we looked through it, there's no additional cost at this point, other than moving more of that, the 677, into the operating budget.
So in other words, anything else that is recommended would be no cost to implement. Is that what you're saying?
There are, just as an example, suppose one of the recommendation was that we needed an employee, whether full-time or part-time, to manage, control, handle
Right.
the sewer. That would come out of the sewer enterprise fund, not out of the operating budget, because it's part of that. So if that, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but if it was, that would be funded out of there. A rate study, which is something you've already authorized, and I'm still trying to get that done. That would come out of there, not coming out of the town council. I mean, out of the operating budget. That comes out of that sewer enterprise fund. It has to, because it's a cost of that fund, not here. So any increased cost or anything out of that isn't coming out of our operating budget, other than moving more of that 677, if at all, if any, into our operating budget, but that's it.
I just wanted to be sure that we are anticipating costs, because we need to do something regarding the implementation of some of the recommendations from the sewer report. Okay, the second one is, you're talking about maybe we can look into shared services, what properties we might be able to get rid of, or what have you. Is that part of this year's budget, or those are considerations for
These
the
are all things-
following year's budget?
These are all things that we would be looking at over the next year.
So it does not.
It's not going to affect this year. It's
not
just, it's
affect-
not enough time to get that to affect this year's budget.
Okay, because
in
I
any way,
wasn't
shape, or
sure when
form.
you talked about that, whether that was looking for some type of
No.
source of revenue or decreased expenses. Okay,
No. In fact, one thing we are looking at, that we're still looking at, is we know that there's going to be all of our budgeted amounts will not be spent. There will be some money still in that budget, in the 19 budget, more than likely, available towards the end of this fiscal year. We're looking at, are there any cost, any fees, anything that's associated with the 20 budget that we can legally pay for in this budget? It would require that the council authorizes shifting funds from those line items to the line item to cover this. But it's just something we're looking at, is it a possibility? And there are a couple of areas, and they're nothing huge, but there may be some things like $30,000, $40,000 costs that are coming up that the functions have already started, that we could move into and pay legally. And we've contacted the auditor to make sure that we're doing everything by the book on that, to see if we could cover those costs out of this year's budget and in turn take them off of next year's budget, if that's at all possible. So we're looking at that as well as again, just one more option that we're trying on what to do to try to make this a little better for next year.
Is there any other questions that we may have? I know there's a lot for us to, do you have another question? Go ahead.
Since you raised the issue, when you talk about shifting money from one line item to another and maybe having to come before the council for a vote or approval, do we have any policies on the book that talk to how much money can be shifted from one category to the other or one line item to the other without approval by the town council?
Not that I'm aware of. The only thing that's covered, if we want to shift it from one department budget to another budget. You can't, someone can shift amounts in their own budget, the department head, and we simply do an internal transfer because the bottom line hasn't changed on their budget. That's what you authorized, and that's what it is. The line items may change, but we don't, and that's done internally that we do. And the process requires it goes through the finance director as well as the town manager, and if we both agree that it is a reasonable, and typically what it is for is because the line item that they want to move it into was improperly funded and they didn't have enough money to pay their contracted costs that are associated with that line item. So that's typically what we get now on the shift internally. If we wanted to move, suppose we had it in just, I'll give you an example. There's going to be probably about $60,000 or $70,000 excess in the town manager's budget at the end of this fiscal year because of the fact that most of my salary comes out of my IT budget. 120 is budgeted for the town manager, along with the FICA amount is all in there. The stipend that I'm being paid and over and above that is coming out of there, but the rest of it is still sitting there. So that money's in there, okay? So that could be, again, to use to pay down some of these other things. We've got $100,000 more or less that was put into contingency to cover the police payroll increase. That was never moved over. That is sitting in there. So some of the things, I'll just give you an example of what we're looking at. We put those leases out last year on the vehicles. There's no pre-penalty for paying those off. And as long as we don't go over budget and we just work within the budget that you authorized and the FTM authorized, my hope is that if we've got that money available, let's utilize that to pay off that lease. That way we could actually take that lease money, those costs out of the budget for next year. So those are the things I'm looking at to see if we can do it, if the money's available. What it would mean is, and again, it's all on how you want to look at it. If we leave it in there, that money will ultimately, anything over and above, will go into the reserve fund. And then X amount into the pensions and that. So it's either we leave it in there and it goes to that, or we help to offset some of those expenses that we're facing for the following year, which are extreme. So if we can do some of that, again, that'll be up to you. It'll be within the amount that's allowed under the charter, what was approved. It's simply shifting some of those funds to a different line item to pay those off.
Okay, with that being said, if there's no other questions, there was, like I said, there's a lot to absorb. We got to look over a lot, and I know the second part of the work session was set a schedule for review of the department budgets. If you want to give us some suggestions that will work, so whenever this place is free, that we can use it.
Do you want to do 1 day, 2 days? How would you like to do it?
Well, first of all, we're going to receive our books within the next several days in the school department budget, so we'll have the total package to look over. Am I correct?
I would like to schedule this for as late into next week as possible to give us time to make sure that we've got that, as well as all of the rest of the stuff that we've got to do.
And we've had time to absorb it.
Right, and that
look
gives
it
you a
over.
week plus to go through it. In the meantime, we will add the fluff, add the non-fluff, we'll add the school department budget, and all the rest of the other pieces that go into this.
No, I don't have, my particular calendar, towards the end of next week would be.
That's what I think it would be, again, it's up to you guys. I think if you had time to review this, I think it's an appropriate time frame, like maybe Wednesday, Thursday of next week. If you want to do this in one day, I mean, as you're going to see when you go through these budgets, I don't know if you're going to have a lot to go at with the different department heads. I think you're going to see that they have been decimated in most cases. Most of them are less than last year's budgets. So, I mean, you're seeing what you got in front of you.
19th. We don't have a regular council meeting on the 25th.
We do on the
Yeah, we do.
25th.
Next Monday, we have a regular
Monday.
council meeting.
We do.
Yes.
And then Friday's the 1st.
And the following week is the school budget hit.
Monday would be the school budget meeting, the following Monday on the 4th.
I'm available next week.
So, Wednesday, Thursday night's good for me, if this place is
I'm
open.
looking, Joanne, is the council chamber open both of those nights? Do you know?
I have to check. I
Would
can
you-
look it up on this.
Would you,
So we're at,
all right,
Wednesday and Thursday, the 27th and 28th?
correct. Thank you.
How many department heads do we have?
Counting myself, I believe it's 9. But again, do you want to look at all of them? Do you want to look at the big ones? The little ones are, I mean, we've got like,
the library, the human
tax assessor,
services.
tax collector. There's nothing in there, but, I mean, the tax assessor has the 228 for the reval. But if you look at the rest of it, his budget's less than last year. Monique in tax collector, her budget is basically what last year's. There's nothing else in these. If you want to look at them, we'll bring them in and you can have, and have them in here. I'm gonna have everybody here, every department head. And Mo and Chris are not department heads, but they are those department supervisors. I will have them in here as well. So but I'd rather set up today, if we can, on who you want, so, everybody can be prepared for it. If you want them all, we'll bring them all. You want to do it 2 nights, we'll do it 2 nights. I want the council to be satisfied with the way we do it. I know last year, the process did not go as well as everyone hoped. It was rushed, and people didn't get a chance to ask some of the questions and all of the questions. So that's why I'm trying to do it this way, to give you a chance to be
If
able
the
to
rest of
do
the
it the way
council
you
feels
want.
that 2 nights would work better than 1, I'm fine. I think like he stated though, a lot of we look at things like the human services, the library, which primarily runs on grants, and there's not a lot of changes. I think that'll be relatively fast. I think the big departments are gonna be the police and the DPW and, the big expense departments.
The library budget is flatlined. We have to flatline that budget. If we go any less than that, she loses state funding.
Yeah.
There's no options. There's nothing in there we can do on that budget. We have reduced that budget down. I mean, she does a lot of what she does with her, like you said, the grants. Human services, same way. They're primarily grant funded. There's not much we can take out of there.
I think that probably, rather than try to rush it in 1 night, if we did 2 nights next week and maybe put a couple of large departments on each night, so we'll have an opportunity to, and if it's a quick meeting, fine. If not, we have the opportunity to go through it. So I think Wednesday and Thursday would kind of work for, I should have bought my phone in. I didn't bring my phone in for my schedule, but I think Wednesday and Thursday next week.
Mr.
would work.
President, Wednesday and Thursday works great for me. And if we could, I'd love to see all the department heads here.
They will be here.
Not necessarily both nights, Ed. If you schedule.
Well, that's why I'm trying to figure this out.
If you schedule 2 of the bigger departments on Wednesday night and maybe 2 or 3 of the smaller, the library, just in case the meeting,
That's what we did 2
right,
years
runs
ago.
well, then.
And we can leave that up to you to,
I'll set up the schedule. That's not a
We're
problem.
gonna-
Do you want it over 2 nights? If you want it over 2 nights, do you want to start at 6?
2 nights, yes.
Yeah, I think 6 o'clock would
6
work.
o'clock? Wednesday and Thursday available? If they're not, we'll throw out whoever's in here.
Right.
Wednesday is 6:30 Planning Commission.
How about Tuesday, is Tuesday available? We have,
Tuesday's municipal court. And then Thursday is the school committee.
School committee has this?
Yeah, that's right.
7 o'clock.
2nd and 4th.
Really?
Okay, how about Plan B?
can we do it on a Saturday?
How would you like to do it all on a Saturday? We can get here about
do it on
9 o'clock,
Saturday
10
morning?
o'clock. It's gonna be a long day, a little tough.
Well,
We
you
do
know,
it on a Saturday. Now, maybe we get more people here.
That's true, that's true.
Saturday's okay
Can we,
with me.
can we do it a week from Saturday?
And then we can do it
It
all.
would be a week from it would be on the, what is it, 1st, I think it is.
Second,
Be the second.
2nd. It would be February 2nd.
No, it'd be March
March 2nd, I'm hoping.
That's probably not a bad idea. It will be a long day, but we can bring them all
What
in,
time would you be looking to start?
I would say let's do it early.
like 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
9 o'clock?
I think 9 o'clock.
Again, I want, Mr. Cody, we'll
mean,
come, we'll come wake you up if you need
I'm
it.
up 5 in the morning. I'm gonna do it at 7. I don't
Hey,
care.
I'm working Friday.
Him and,
night
I mean, him and
Saturday,
I will be
so
giving emails back and forth at 3 o'clock in the morning on days, so, I mean, we're up. We'll be here at 4 in the morning if you want to start at 10.
No, 9 is fine.
9 is good. It's gonna be a long day. I mean, I don't wanna
It's gonna be
waste
a
a whole
long day, early.
You know, and you say that it's gonna be a long day, I will schedule everybody here at the same, for everybody for that day. I think when you start going through, I don't think it's gonna be as
Yeah, I
long
don't
as you
think it'll be
think
as
it
long
might be.
as it
obvious I need my beauty sleep?
That 1 day is not gonna make a difference. I hate to be the bearer of.
Hey,
I'm not even going anywhere near that one.
Gary, we're not gonna take any photographs.
All right, so listen, if there's no one else from the council that has any objection, I think a week from Saturday at 9 o'clock in the
good to
morning
me.
would probably work, and we could get all department heads in there. Not
good
that
with
anybody wants to spend their weekend, but let's get it done, and
Okay, I know my wife's gonna love the fact that I'm here on another Saturday. You guys the same, I know.
I'm a lot fresher at 9 in the morning. I am.
yeah, I'd rather get an early start, so if that's good, does that work for you?
Yes, that does. I do have one thing I wanted to, because I was flipping into my April calendar.
Yes.
Because Gary threw me off on the date. Sorry. On April 8th and April 22nd, we have a town council meeting scheduled and we have budget hearings. Do we want to do both on the same night or do we want to change those? On the 8th is a
Public hearing.
the
on
public
budget.
hearing. Yes. And then on the 22nd, it is to amend and adopt the budget.
So on the April 8th, we have a regular council meeting scheduled also.
And yes,
Can't do them both. Can't do them both in the same night. It's a budget work session. We need to do it another
Would
night.
everybody please send me some days that you'd like to see and give
Well,
me an
can-
email on that?
Well, just a
I
thought,
think-
can we
I think
change-
it'd be, probably be wise leaving those, see as they've already been listed, and changing our regular council meeting.
could we look at just changing the council meetings to?
Tuesday?
Tuesday the 9th and Tuesday the 23rd? Is that a possibility?
Probably the.
That's actually
you know,
probably, it
probably
is
the
easier.
other- The other, or the other, you know.
We've got a little time on that.
Or
We'll
put
check the
the
availability.
Monday in the middle, and depending how much, what other business have we got?
Municipal court happens on Tuesday.
Okay, so we'll have to
Yeah,
look.
we got a little bit of time on that. That's a good
But if
point,
you tell
though.
the municipal court judge to finish up early, he can accommodate us.
I can just cut his budget and that's the end of it. He won't have to be in here.
All right, so why don't we,
Exactly.
we got some time. We can email you and discuss with you. We can find out what date this is available. Yeah, that was a good point, Councilwoman, that we can't have them both the same night because it wouldn't be fair.
It's going to be really, those will be
So,
long
We can
evenings.
I'm not objecting to changing the council meeting, and
Okay.
whatever night, I'm pretty flexible, and we'll be in contact with you, find out the availability of this place, whatever works, whether it be on a Tuesday, Thursday, whatever works. I'm pretty flexible. I know this is,
President, when
Well, we
a
could make a change, we
final
got 5
schedule
Mondays
is obtained, would you please fill me in?
Oh,
Because
we'll-
I'm not
Make
gonna
them-
email.
Exactly.
yeah,
We
we'll
can
make
always-
sure,
We can always
I'll
shift
get-
him down a week.
When somebody tells me.
Yeah, we'll make sure that gets out. I mean, I know you got a lot going
I mean,
on.
again, it's, we've got 5 Mondays in April over there. It's possible we could just switch the regular meetings to say the 15th and the 29th and just be meeting on Monday nights.
Yeah. We do 4 Mondays in a row and do it that way.
4 Mondays or.
Probably gonna be the
or
best
5
way.
Mondays in a row.
We know
We've
the
got-
council chamber's
We've
open.
got 5 Mondays in April.
Well, I mean, if we can make that decision now,
We can.
I'm fine with that, I'm fine with that, I'm flexible, I know it's gonna be a crazy month, so,
Yeah.
if you
That'll
wanna
allow,
do
that'll
all the
allow us
Mondays
to
in
change the
April-
calendar on with the Secretary of State's office anyways, because we have to notify them and make the
Right.
change on there, so. If you decide you want to do that now,
April 1st, there's already a town council work session on the budget.
And that's on Monday.
On 8th, there's a public hearing on the budget.
Yep.
We don't have anything on the 15th.
15th.
The 22nd is a meeting to amend
Yep.
and adopt the budget. So we have to schedule something on the 15th.
15th and the 29th, and we don't have anything on the 29th either, right?
That would be a
So,
regular town
We
council.
could do
but yeah,
regular,
regular council meetings on the 15th and 29th
I will
if
not
we
be
had
here
to.
on the
we shift them down a week.
Yeah,
So
we just
that will
should-
have to go on the agenda for Monday night to change it?
We will do that.
Okay.
We will do that. Well, we'll do it
Which we will
tomorrow
decide
at
that tomorrow.
the
We're gonna
agenda
meet
meeting.
tomorrow. All right, so, that's good. We'll just mark in your calendar every Monday in April.
That's it.
And
That's
that'll
good.
work. And,
Adjust the
Mr.
calendar,
Cody,
there
I
you
will
go.
make
That
sure
way we
you'll
don't
get a
have to
copy
dis-
of when the meetings are.
They don't have
And,
to displace anybody.
I quit.
yeah,
I quit.
yeah, and we're still planning on a week from Saturday to do the budget hearings.
Yes, oh, yes.
All the
The
department
second,
heads.
the second on the budget hearing
I think that
on
makes sense, as much as I don't wanna spend my Saturday like anybody else, it makes sense to get it all
Oh,
done
but
in
we
one
get some more
day.
people in by doing it that way.
a request for plenty of coffee on site.
All right, so we have,
Want donuts too? Want donuts?
Boxes of Joe.
Chunky brew, you know, oh, come on, that's good coffee.
Boxes of Joe.
$3 a 6 pounds for $3. That's good coffee, would you buy it?
all right, so we have our
Would you
schedule
like some
set.
donuts too? I'll even go to West Warwick and pick them up from that new place.
No, don't, if you looked at me, donuts are not necessary.
So if I said Alley's though, that could change, right?
Oh, that
All right, so we've set our schedule. You're gonna make sure you email us with all the schedule, after everything's definite on that. We're gonna have a week from Saturday to do the budget hearings. Does anybody else have any questions tonight before we close? We have a lot to absorb and a lot to read through. If nobody else has any questions, I guess a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I would like to make that motion,
I have a
Mr.
second?
President.
Second it?
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for the hard work and everything you put into this, and it's just the beginning.